All right, let's grip it and rip it. You start first, like where are you at? What are your thoughts? And then I'll jump in with having listened to the audio and then read your text. How are you feeling? And where can I be the most help? And what kind of help are you looking for? Are you looking for advice, or are you just looking for general kind of eyes on it?
I'm looking for your expertise. I feel like as a first draft, for not having done anything like this before, it's okay. Like it's something I can work from. But beyond that, that's kind of where I'm at. I want to leave the audience with a sense of internal transformation at a moment. I want to shift the perspective in a way that they will never see themselves the same way again, and in a way that's better.
And I believe that you will absolutely be able to do that. So I have thoughts.
Okay.
I have questions. Do you have answers? So let me first ask you this. So we talked generally about a transformation, and you want them to be different than when they leave than when they show up. What specifically do you want them to think, feel, and do?
Ideally, I want them to think that there's a better way,
okay,
than just the human nature of reaction. I want them to feel that there is hope, there's possibility, there's something better. There's more. Yes, because there's more.
Yeah, because it's nice to look at somebody else's results and go, oh, it's great that that's possible, but I don't feel like it's possible for me.
Yeah, I want that for them. Yeah, absolutely. All of my work is always geared. I'm like, how can the person that I'm working with get the most transformation? I mean, in all of my writing, ever since like I was like 6 years old and writing a story, like my end result was, how can I make them think and feel and be differently at the end of this? Like,
well, you're a prolific writer too. Your writing is brilliant.
Thank you.
It's like next level brilliant. Okay. What do you want them to do?
Ideally, I want them to do is book a call with me.
Okay.
I mean, there's no sense in doing this unless it's going to lead towards growth.
Yep. So, when we say there's a better way, that's sort of a general, if we were to zone in on a better way to what? A better way to, and so if it sounds like I'm nitpicking, I am, but
don't apologize.
But it becomes the map for, it makes everything, it makes all of the other speech writing decisions easy, because you're like, okay, we're going there. Because it's easy to get lost in the weeds with anecdotes and quotes and inspirations. Yeah. And it's like you got to trim all of the fat off the speech. And nope. I
am both mom and speechwriter at the moment. So that's a 4-year-old.
I think that's amazing. So let me ask you this. Let me ask that a different way. Where do you think they're stuck? How do you think you can help them? And how do you think their life will be different once they make the shift?
Okay. Ask one question at a time. How do I think they're stuck? In my education and experience and grand observer of humanity, people don't know what they don't know. They assume that the way they're operating, the way they're being is the way it's supposed to be, and that's all there is. That could look like just intense, constant frustration with life, at the bare minimum. It could be feeling like they're at the mercy of life. It could be, any sense of that, of like, this is where I am. This is my lot in life. Things are going to change. This is just who I am. This is how I behave.
Hey, let me just throw some words at you just for word soup. Would they be?
Yeah, please.
Would they be settling?
Yes.
They be settling? Yeah. Would there be what I would describe a low level, tolerable amount of despair?
Yes.
Like the kind of despair where it's not so desperate that it moves you to action, but it's just this low level kind of feeling of just like almost overwhelm and hopelessness and settling and stuck. And
so I think there's varying levels. I think at the base level, they're the people that feel that way and don't realize they feel that way. And so they just react to life in just this negative, angry, frustrated kind of constant energy. It's going to take a bit for those people to realize that there's even something different possible. I don't believe that people like that are really going to be in the audience in this kind of capacity.
Okay.
Right. The next level of that are the people that realize, like, they sense that there's a despair, there's a settling, it's that sense of, I feel like there's more, but but it's probably not available to me.
Okay. Okay.
And then the next level that would be, I feel like there's more available. How do I make it available to me?
Okay. Perfect. This is great. So, aside from the obvious, because I certainly have my opinions, but I'm interested in asking you the question, how do you think you have earned the right to show them this in a way that is different from everybody else?
Lived experience. I mean, that's the basic answer. You know, we know my story about my son being killed 6 years ago. It's been a lot. I mean, from the moment the crash happened, you know, and every day, and probably for the rest of my life, of this constant introspection of like, where am I? What's available to me? Do I believe it's available to me? How do I access that being available to me? And then how do I trust and believe and receive it? And maybe that's a shift in perspective for myself. Maybe it's in taking new opportunities and chances for myself. I fed her breakfast, I promise.
Totally fine. I love her little spirit.
She's very spirited. One moment, my dear, and I will help you. She just ate breakfast like 20 minutes ago.
Can I ask you a question about that? Because you have experienced the kind of grief that, the most profound grief. What I notice from people is that we avoid pain and discomfort if we can at all cost. Would it be fair to say that when you were faced with this, you didn't have a choice but to go like dead nut straight into it?
Yeah. And that was the word that comes to mind, is like the most soul shaking kind of reality.
I just, okay, that's it.
Because when something like that happens, there's no escaping it. And at that point, it's like wrapping your mind and your being around, how do I move forward with this? Because it feels so impossible. And grief at that sudden level is so overwhelming, is so powerful that it's literally only possible in just short bursts. And that's literally what it is the rest of your life, of managing those brief influx of massive grief. And then your body just kind of, your body and your mind and your emotions just kind of shut down after a little bit, because it's so overwhelming, until the next time it happens. And you just kind of process in bite-sized moments and deconstruct emotionally. And it's like exposure therapy. That's really what it becomes, whether you want it to or not.
Mm-hmm. What was the, or was there one thing that that had you keep going when you just wanted to get on your knees and give up? And the reason I'm asking that is I'm actually thinking of the audience, because they're going to hear your story and they're going to feel their own, and their grief and pain most likely does not compare. But I've said this to you before, like in terms of the bereaved, like you are a beacon of hope. And if, you know, for you actually came to my mind recently. We had a loss in our family, and one family member is suffering specifically, and it's just you're the first person I think to that of unlocking or building a bridge of possibility that you like, you know, this person grabbed my arm yesterday and said, am I going to be okay?
Yeah.
You were the first person I thought of. It's like, you've so earned the right to teach that. And so I'm curious, like in the moments, they're going to be thinking of the moment where they're like, I can't do this. I can't. What was that moment like for you, if there was one?
Okay. That gives me some clarity to be able to answer your question. At first, I didn't believe I was going to be okay, and I didn't want to be okay. Realizing that, I also realized like part of me had if I couldn't do it for myself, I had to find a way to do it for my son, because my oldest son was, 7, and there was no, we had to tell my son that his little brother that he'd waited for had been killed. And I'm not sure what was harder, the crash or that moment.
Right.
So I didn't want to break his fragile little heart again by me not being strong enough.
Mm.
And then there's also my husband, because he was already dealing with so much, and I couldn't find the sense of worthiness in myself or resilience in myself. So I put that energy onto others that I cared about, because they mattered more to me than I mattered to me.
Mm. Here's what I so admire about you that is, I believe, very rare, is when I met you, like when you first, you were involved in one of the courses I teach, I remember thinking, I had a preconceived idea of what you might be like in terms of, I guess, vibe or openness, and understandably so. And you're one of the most beautifully open, like there's so much to learn from you. So in the moments when you wanted to be like hard and constricted and like, to a differing degree, I hear so many women say the same thing. Well, I've got to look after my kids and my husband and my job and whatever. And we put ourselves at the back of the line. But at some point, like, you did the hurdy work.
Mm-hmm.
And this beautiful, malleable, scarred, inspiring prophet sits before us today as a result of you being both strong and soft. What is that like, or what advice would you give people in terms of that? Because all of our natural reaction is to close off and to shut down and to protect, and we're wired as human beings to do that. And yet you did the opposite, and you're going to change the world because of it.
I think part of me is I've always been wired to recognize that the power is the wrong word, but in the fear, there's something beautiful. There is a growth, there is a realization, there is something I'm meant to learn. There's something that's going to help me be more of me in the world, whatever that's going to look like, right? I just kind of trust that I'm being guided to become the most me I'm supposed to be in whatever puzzle piece that tends to fit. But even when I was younger, I had a sense of the things that scared me that were so out of my comfort zone are the things that I gravitated towards. I started playing hockey. It was just floor hockey, but I was an introvert, bookworm, didn't talk to anybody. And here I was, like, really aggressive, in sports, which was the antithesis. Things like triathlon. I nearly drowned when I was younger, and that traumatized me my entire life, to the point where I failed swimming lessons when I was 11 years old. But I took that and decided I wanted to do triathlon, to the point where I signed up for a half iron, which starts with a 1.2 mile open water swim.
Oh, I'm familiar.
So
did a triathlon by accident once. It was horrific.
I signed up for half iron before I'd even done my first sprint. And in doing that, I had to learn how to swim and face that fear. And
So you by nature are somebody who like runs to the fire, and I of many people can relate to that.
There's a difference between the fire, right? I'm not going to do the things that I feel like I'm going to die.
Sure.
Like, I have to be very clear. But there's just this like gut knowing of, okay, this is the next stepping stone towards unlocking me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whatever it is I'm supposed to learn. And I had always thought that the hardest thing was ever that half iron, until I gave birth to my children. And then I'm like, that's nothing. And then I always thought that all of that was the hardest, until losing one. And so I took what I knew and tried to use that to my advantage, to my survival. And it was in stepping back, stepping into myself and saying, and recognize, like, I'm terrified here. This time I don't have a choice. This is the scary thing I have to face. But I know that I faced scary things before, and I've done it by surrendering to the process, and moment by moment trying to be grounded in what it is I'm supposed to learn, allowing it to transform me. So it's like and that's the thing, like I didn't want to harden off. I mean, I was angry. It was more rage. Like I wanted to burn everything down. I get scared, it turns into rage. I get scared, it turns into I'm going to work harder. I get scared, it means I'm going to go faster. Because then, control freak, it made me feel like I had control so I could do the things, and at this point, it's like, all right, I can't fix this. I can't solve it. I'm going to figure out how to survive one more day for my kids. I'm going to figure out how to channel all this anxious energy into community service. I can't watch my son grow up, but I'm going to make sure people don't forget his name. And I just tried to turn it into something I could do as opposed to being stuck in all the stuff I couldn't do, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. At the end of your days, if there is a funeral for you and you have lived the perfect life and done all of the things that you wanted to do and make the impact you wanted to make, whatever that looked like, if there was one message you could leave behind without any other explanation, just like this message, what would that be?
The happiness to life. And I don't know if this is coming out all wrong, but everything I do, everything I'm about, everything I teach, everything I guide is about three main pillars. And it's about self-compassion, self-connection, and a little bit of courage. And I think if we can just hold those three things for ourselves, everything else.
Compassion, self, what was the second one?
It's compassion, connection, and courage.
Love it.
And I think if we can hold those three things either for ourselves or with others, then everything has a way of just working itself out.
It's funny. So many people will think that they don't have the ability to be courageous because they're still feeling the fear.
Yeah.
And
that's the only time you can be courageous.
I always say courage is just fear in motion. Okay, this is helpful. So I wanted to kind of like have a general chat about you and your direction and your heart and what you want to say and what you want to leave them with, because I know so many people, when they're putting together a speech, write it in real time, and you need the map first, because the talk itself can be dirty, it can be impromptu, it can be, but as long as you have the end goal of where you're going, you could say this 100 different times, 100 different ways, and it would land every time, as long as you are married to the end goal. And the beautiful thing about you is, like Robert Cialdini wrote this book called Influence, if you've heard me say this before, and the ability to change somebody's life starts with the ability to influence them. And in his book, he talks about, the laws of influence, or the factors of influence. And they are like authority, which you have. They are, social proof, which, you've impacted the people around you. It's consistency, which you show up day after day when you don't want to. But the one that is the most profound, in my opinion, especially as a speaker, is reciprocity. And it's the idea that as a human being, if I give you something, you're wired to want to give me something back. Here's where it gets magical as a speaker. We are all, societally speaking, supposed to be okay. We're not supposed to show our vulnerable bits. We look on social media, everybody else has got the perfect life. We feel shittier, we feel worse, we feel less than. And what happens is we're suffering in silence and silos. And so many emotions move, like fear moves, joy moves, anger moves, grief moves, but shame and that dimming of your soul doesn't move. It has to be moved. If left alone, it calcifies. And so as a speaker, your gift, and this is something that you are for sure brilliant at, is if you think about the law of reciprocity and you give something first, and what you give is your raw vulnerability, then the entire audience is wired to want to give you their raw vulnerability back. And what happens, and you will watch it from stage, I promise you, you will watch people crack open one chrysalis at a time, and you will see them either literally or figuratively say, me too. So the gift that you give them is they get to access the piece of them that they buried away, that they didn't move through, that they didn't step by step, bite by bite, work their way through. It for many people, it's a low level, tolerable amount of despair, but over time it just calcifies, and you are going to crack them open, and it's going to be the biggest gift you could ever give them. So I wanted to first of all honor that.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get into you. So you sent me the recording. Your opening line, I'm just going to read it back to you, if I may, or if you have it, if you can read it.
Yeah, I have all the.
Okay, just not the quote, just your first paragraph.
Oh, okay. August 31st, 2016. The porcelain is cold and smooth under my hands. I'm holding on to the hospital sink for balance. I know everything on my right side hurts, from the staples in my head to my broken ribs and grated ankle, but somehow I barely feel it.
From that moment, I get goosebumps every time I read it. You have us, because it's such a stark juxtaposition. There is going to be nothing more powerful in this story than the essence of you and your story. Yes, but you specifically. And so in the original read, in the original thing you wrote, you opened with a quote. Mm-hmm. There isn't a quote that is going to be more powerful than anything you say. And it's cool to be candid. Okay, starting with a quote when you have the story you do is a soft start.
Can I, and maybe you can help me through this because you know me a little bit better. It's the mindset. It's the underlying fear of me and my story is too much for people to hear, so I have to soften it.
So I believe you should only speak from a scar and not a wound. That's not my quote. I think that was originally Liz Gilbert, but you can allude to, and you can paint a picture of what has happened without burdening the capacity of the audience.
That's what I'm trying to do delicately.
You can do it delicately, but it should shake us a bit. It should shake us because it is, but it also, just getting goosebumps. Part of the reason you are so profound is because you have been through this experience, and this experience wasn't palatable or digestible. It was unfathomably soul shaking, as you said so eloquently. We don't have the capacity to go all of the way there, but it's okay to take them. You can take us down without burdening beyond our capacity, but you can take us down because you're going to take us up and out. You can't take us down and leave us there, because then you're abandoning and leaving your audience stranded. But
that's just mean.
but the thing is, but we are feeling our own version, and not comparable by any means, but we are feeling our own version of unrecognized and unrealized pain, or what's the word I'm looking for? Words. We haven't resolved that pain. It's sitting in us, right? And so, you were talking about your ability to go in and to touch it, maybe only a bite at a time, but you're touching it and you're touching it and you're touching it. And for you had to, because it wasn't going anywhere and it wasn't changing. For many of your audience, it's going to be stuff that they can shelf. It's going to cost them their health. It's going to cost them their self-esteem. It's going to cost them their feeling of worthy. It's going to cost them everything. But instead of like a sharp pain, it's going to be a slow, self-deprecating death.
Yeah, slowly suffocating.
So I would say, take us there. And with that opening line, if you can you then read that again and then read the next paragraph after that?
Okay, I'm trying to remember if I ad-libbed when I did the audio.
However it comes out, because I'm going to make a point when you read the second line or the second paragraph.
Okay, I'm just going to read the first, yeah, because I don't know how it.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll start over.
Pages you're comfortable with, like read a little bit of it so we can just get a flavor of like what is that exactly.
Okay, I'll get this. August 31st, 2016. The porcelain is cold and smooth under my hands. I'm holding on to the hospital sink for balance. I know everything on my right side hurts, from the staples in my head to my broken ribs and grated ankle, but somehow I barely feel it. Looking up into the mirror above the sink, it is my reflection that surprises me most in this moment. Ever notice how there's always some sort of mirror around? A reflection in the window, a glimpse in the rearview mirror, and boy, is she judgmental as hell. Her face is gray, my reflection, from cold industrial lighting and loss. She looks lifeless, lost, confused, a ghost walking in human form. And her eyes are empty, unable to fathom the fullness of the pain except in glimpses of visceral recognition. Just hours before, my infant son Tristan and I had been run over in a crosswalk near our home by a distracted driver. She accuses and taunts with empty, angry eyes. What kind of mother are you? You couldn't save him. You're the ultimate failure. You didn't deserve him. You don't deserve to live. Survival guilt is hard. Mom guilt is cruel. Together, they are malevolent, indeed. That reflection, she seemed real. As real and raw as any truth uttered by the universe, and I couldn't escape her. But what I didn't know then, as it is always in those moments when we are our worst critics and accusers, both judge and jury against ourselves in an instant, the reflection, her, me, it wasn't real.
Whew, girl.
I should have brought tissues to our call.
Always bring tissues to our call, Mindy. You know better than that. So here's what I'm going to say. So it's all brilliant, but it goes from first person to watching it happen from above. I am craving to be in that moment with you, not you describing it. Mm-hmm. Which you describe, because here your blessing is your curse in because you are such a brilliant writer. And so as I was reading through, because there's I think it was 19 minutes that you sent me. It's an unbelievable book, but it's not the same as a talk. A talk is far different.
That's what I said. I'm like, I can write a story, but writing a speech is a different thing.
Yeah, because you're unwrapping it for the people, right? So, and also, here's what I'll say: like, you've written it so beautifully, and it goes on and on and on, and it's and the writing is gorgeous, and the imagery is gorgeous. You are not going to be able to remember that word for word from stage, and even if you could, it's going to translate as you reciting something, not reliving and retelling it. And the transformation is actually in your energy. It's in what happens in the field more than the words that come out of your mouth.
And realizing that, like, I can never memorize a speech for that reason. Like, I have to feel that energy and that connectivity and kind of just, some people use the word channel, but I can give words to that in the moment as long as I'm in that energetic reciprocity space. I mean, more grounded in my own than them, because if I feel more to them, I get distracted. But
yeah. So what I'll say about the first passage, you have people going, what happened? And then you almost tell it in the third person. I want to be with you real time in that moment. So you're sort of describing it. I want you to tell it first person as if it's happening.
So when I went from her face is gray, cold industrial lighting and loss, is that what you mean?
Yeah, because it's again, it's beautiful writing, but you're talking about it. I want the grit. I want some grit.
Okay, because the reason I did that is that's literally how it felt. That I wasn't like I could not associate with that image in the mirror. I looked at that and I felt no connection. Like this isn't me. Who is she?
So what? So maybe talk about that, but there is something, because it's sort of like, it's such an impactful punch in the face in the beginning. And then we're talking about it. I kind of want to be like right down in the gutter with you.
That's not going to be too much for this like women's leadership and
I don't
empowerment.
Because here's the thing, you can't half say it. You can say it in a way that is that is not more than they can handle, but you can't say it, you can't half say it, because if you half say it, you're going to lose them.
Okay.
Because I know when I read on a little bit further, you talked a lot about the analogy of a reflection and the quote of a reflection, and that's why I started with like, where do we want to take this audience? Because I could recite the bit about the reflection. I could take the top part of your story out, and I could take that and I could stand on stage and deliver it. It would be just as true for me as it is for you, but your magic is in your experience. And so and it's not to say that you can't use it, because it's absolutely valuable and it illustrates the point you want to take and where you want to take the audience and stuff like that. But your audience gets no jobs. So you go right from capturing our heart and having us on the edge of our seat to making us think and burn calories to follow you, even though it makes sense intellectually, but our hearts are open, and that's the best opportunity for transformation. It's kind of like this. Lisa Nichols says there are 4 phases of sharing a story. The first one is information. The second one is inspiration. Next, we have motivation. And finally, we have transformation. And so you get us right out of the gate and you've cracked us open and we're like raw for a transformation. And then after that, when you start to get too much into the reflection and the analogy and stuff like that, and you're talking about it and less about you and your story, you're giving us information now. And so it is such a stark switch of gears. I want your story. I want to know. And that's why, again, we started with this, like, what was that like for you? What was the hardest moment when you thought you couldn't go on? And paint that picture, because they're going to feel their pain. And the only way they can work through that, like, you're the guide. And you have earned the right to take them out of that, if anybody has. But we first need to come down into the trench with you a little bit. Like, what does that pain look like? Because I don't know what the loss of a child feels like, but I will be feeling my worst version of pain and where I'm stuck and where I'm hurting. And I want to come on that journey with you. Because in between that, there are points where you're going to teach us things, right? And it's kind of like this. Have you ever seen a movie where the movie's playing and then it's almost like the movie stops and then the character speaks right to the audience?
Yeah.
And then they go back into the story. I'd love to see you do something like that. I call it the bounce.
Okay.
So like, because it, again, going back to the concept of your audience gets no jobs, it would be something like you would say part of your story, and then you would ask them a question. Who here has ever, whatever that is for the point in your story you are, don't leave any of it for us to figure out on our own. While the emotion will be obvious, you need to tell us, what is the lesson? What is the takeaway? What should we be thinking here?
That helps a lot, because when you're saying the audience gets no jobs, I'm like, what does that look like? But now that you're showing me that breakout, because you clued into what I was writing very astutely, because I did purposely try to inform, because I felt like I was being too much, because I felt like I was too intense, and I didn't want to take them there because I thought it would cause more harm than good. And so I took the safe approach of education, but then it lost the power.
It will only cause more harm than good if you give us, I'm going to scratch that comment. I'll come back to it. You will only do more harm than good if you don't take us up and out of it. If someone like you can endure what you did and come up and out of it and tell us every step along the way what that was for you and how that relates to us, and what that was like for you and how it relates to us, and bounce back and forth. So
Yeah.
tell your story and then stop and then say, have you ever, or tell us what it's like that's not that. Because you've also had other experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Or
I
you
can do this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or you may say, you're talking about that specific, stop if you have to.
Hold on.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, we're officially in that age of when we get frustrated, we just start screaming.
I'm still at that age. I don't know.
Truth, Mom. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, like, tell us what it's like that it's not like. So tell us the story as you would, and you're so good, like, you're such a good writer, and you have to remember you're not writing a talk, or you're not writing, rather, a book or a story. You're reliving it with us and you're unpacking it for us. You almost have to tell us how to feel, tell us what it's like. Ask us, have we ever X, Y, and Z? Kind of like, teach us, drop a breadcrumb, like, take us with, because what happened, I found when I started to read your opening paragraph, don't change a syllable. It's gorgeous.
Okay.
But after that, when you start talking third person, and then when you go on to talk more about reflection and just teaching general information about the analogy of the reflection, which is applicable, but I want more of your story. What happens is I actually can't come with you for any of the rest of your talk, because I'm stuck in this moment. And I'm like, what happened? Like, I don't want to hear about any of that. Like, what?
Okay.
And the beauty is, it's your story. You can't be wrong with it. You could tell it 100 different ways. You'll be dead nuts right every time. You're going to move the audience every time, but just give us the opportunity, because it almost creates a pattern interrupt where nothing you say after that, like, we can't come with you.
Okay.
And I know that you have a lot to share and to teach, and it's all valuable, but do it through your story. And I would dare even say, this is where I stopped myself earlier. If there is a visual that you remember that is not traumatic for you, and not maybe graphic, but, and here's why I say that, like, things get burned in our mind. And so a way you could, let me give you an example that would be maybe, personal to me, without also being too graphic, because I have varying stories as well. So the night my father is passing, he is at the point in his life where he can't speak. He had lung cancer, so he only ever spoke in a whisper for like 9 months. And it's his last day on earth. Like, the clock is winding down. And we had this story, not a story, but we had this experience where, I'm actually wearing a Stevie Ray Vaughan t-shirt right now, which is completely ironic. My dad loved the blues guitarist Stevie Ray Vaughan, loved him. And after I moved out of the house, every single Sunday I would go for breakfast with my parents. And every single Sunday we would hop in this Buick, his Buick that reeked of cigarette smoke. And he would have a Stevie Ray Vaughan CD in the deck every single Sunday, not a CD, the same CD. And this went on for months, and then literally years. And at one point I'm like, good God, man. Like, I'm like, Dad, why don't you swap it out? Like, try John Mayer. John Mayer's an amazing blues guitarist, was influenced by Stevie Ray Vaughan, even has a Stevie Ray Vaughan tattoo, like he's breathing. And my dad stops the car and looks at me, and he points to the CD player. He's like, this is still good. And I'm like, well, I actually can't argue that. So that became our thing. Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer, Stevie Ray Vaughan, John Mayer. And the night of his passing, we're in palliative care, and I set up his computer and I put that CD in the disc player. and I'm playing him out to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and the man can't swallow, and the man can't speak, and he is barely conscious, but you know what he can do? He can put his hands up and air guitar Stevie Ray Vaughan like an MF boss. And so that image of him playing the guitar and hearing that is seared in my mind. And so for some people, it might be the ticking of the clock when a thing happens. And it's like, some people cannot stand the ticking of a clock because it brings them right back to a moment. Or for some people, it might be a specific song. So I don't think we would be able to handle a graphic detail, but if there is something that you remember that takes us to that moment as if we are there, I think that is not overburdening. I actually think that's fair.
Something that comes to mind that would be palatable for others to hear would be the moment I had to leave the hospital. Up until that point, I had made sure all the blinds were drawn. Like, I had no sense of time, didn't want to see the sun. I was so angry, I didn't even want to see the sun. And the moment I had to leave the hospital, it was, sunny day. And I remember being angry and didn't want to see it. And I remember the door. How once I left that hospital, I had to face real life. And I didn't know how to do it. There's always a door.
Oh my God, I just got a beautiful analogy. So this might be an example of that. You tell that story and then you stop and you say, what is your door? What is the door you didn't think you could bear to walk through because you knew as you crossed that threshold, nothing would be the same again. Like, that would be an example of where you ask them, you tell them, like, full body goosebumps. You tell them that story because I can see the door when you're like, I am with you in that.
Yeah.
And then when you ask me that question, I'm like, God, like, I know what that door is for me.
Yeah.
And
that
so
feels like something that's relatable.
And so I'm getting the lesson that you're giving. So I would just say, as you go through it again and flesh it out, I would, this is the way I do talks. I'll flesh out kind of the journey I want to take people on, and I'll chunk it down almost into buckets or like parts of the story. So in my TED Talk, I had a bunch of buckets. And the first one was, meeting my mentor. And then the second one was the struggle. And then the third one was the phone call. And then what happened after that. So if you can chunk it down, almost like chapter.
Very hero's journey as far as,
It does, but it doesn't necessarily have to follow that specifically. Yeah. I mean, your story arc will follow that, but for remembering purposes, instead of, write it all out. But I would even suggest, because you want to start as you intend to continue. And if you start by writing the whole thing out, it's going to take you a long, long time. You're not going to remember the words as you wrote them, and they don't matter anyway. What may be helpful is you writing down some things like the story of the door, what you were thinking, or the mirror that you were looking in, or, chunk it down into buckets. And then make bullet points for the buckets. And if you're comfortable writing it out in sentences, for sure, it's going to be very difficult for you to deliver it impactfully if you're starting to imprint this story you're writing as a book.
Exactly. Yes.
Because you're going to be way more stressed.
Yeah.
It's going to translate as cold because you're going to be in your head trying to remember it, instead of in what my mentor, Gail Larson, calls your home zone. Like, you own this domain. There is nobody, you cannot be wrong. You cannot be wrong telling your story. And I know that you have the courage and the bravery to share it in a way that is going to be an absolute life-changing gift for this audience. So what I would suggest is get a bunch of sticky notes, chunk out your story in piles or buckets, I call them. And then bullet point it, and then practice saying it. Like, instead of writing it, practice saying it. Like, what are the things that you want to make mention of? Is it the door? Is it the Like what are the non-negotiable points, bullet points in that bucket that we need to hit to be able to move on to the next bucket? Because in the moment, you know your story, and you even said, you know, I could say this, I could write this a whole bunch of different ways. And then we can reconvene once you have the different buckets. And the last thing I'll say about that, when it comes time, like once you have the content that you want, or the ideas that you want to, the journey you want to take us on, once you have that plotted out on these sheets, then you're going to practice one bucket at a time. So it'll sound like this. We'll have it all plotted out, and I'll say, okay, Mindy, give me bucket 3. And then you'll go, it was a dark, rainy night. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and I was standing under a street light, or whatever. You know what I mean? You'll get just that bucket, because what happens is it imprints on your body, and then you feel comfortable and you're like, oh, bucket 3, that's these 5 things.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll start delivering them in different order. Like I'll say, okay, give me bucket 5. Now give me bucket 1. Now give me bucket 2, because you get comfortable. And then by the time you have to string it together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can do it on your head, because you know the points. And it allows you to be present with the audience more than in your head, remembering what you're supposed to say next. And stress.
Thank you. Like, can
right?
I just say thank you for validating exactly why I was feeling so anxious? Because I'm like, I can't memorize this. People talk about doing TED Talks and have to memorize it. I'm like, I would never be able to do that, because I need, like you said, I need the main core thing, the things that are important to that. I can string together an image.
Yeah.
And just let me connect.
So what my buckets end up looking like, so it starts out, okay, like I'll scribble out, like, what are the things that I need to cover in each of these buckets?
Yeah.
Then I will zip file that down into 6 bullet notes. And so I will have read it and thought about it and spoke it and recorded it a number of times, when I'm like, okay, these are the things that I need to, and I know that if I have a mental trigger, I can hit it.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
I get stuck, it literally it's a sentence or a line. And then what I do is I take that sticky note that has 6 bullet points on it, and I write, I try and figure out some sort of hieroglyphic, some sort of image, some rudimentary childlike drawing that represents the idea. So my entire TED Talk was about 20 printer papers glued together, and it looked like a cave wall. And I just walked along, and I'm like, bang, 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 bang. Because typically we think in pictures, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's the ridiculous cow with a pigtail and curly horns, because I can't draw or whatever. But almost the humor, like the act of making that, imprints it on your body. So literally your entire talk will be 6 sticky notes with a handful of drawings on them. And you will remember them because you had to draw them to make them.
Okay. And
so it's the easiest way. That's how I teach all of my people. If you're going to do a talk, first of all, figure out where you want them to go. What is the journey you want to take away from them? Remember to do the bounce, because your audience gets no jobs. They will not figure it out on their own. Make it absolutely dead nuts easy. Include them in your journey. But the best part is the rocket fuel that is your story. The best part is the rocket fuel that is your energy and your essence. And if you give us that, no matter what you say or how you say it, we win.
Okay.
It is literally impossible for you to lose.
Okay.
And so I'm excited because somebody, it is fun. It's fun, and somebody there is going to book you for your next gig, because this is going to be bomb.
I hope. Yeah. I haven't even allowed myself to think that far ahead. I am just focused on, I want them to be able to crack open enough that they can love themselves just a little bit more at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then take us into the trench, because we're craving it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. You're doing us a disservice if you don't take us down. because we're feeling that pain. It's so stuffed. We don't even know what to do with us. And you're giving us the gift of releasing it. And there isn't a bigger gift than that.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Like,
You're welcome.
oh, now I feel far more empowered. I feel far more at ease. I feel like this feels far more natural to me, which gives me a lot more confidence and assurance.
Yeah.
Even though I have a lot more work ahead of me, like I feel like it feels like it's a natural extension of me, or at least it's going to be a natural extension of me now, instead of trying to force myself into a box.
Organic, and you are just going to be in the moment being who you be. And that's where your magic is. Your magic isn't in great writing when you're delivering a talk. You're a great writer. This could be a book for sure, and I'm sure it will, but you're not writing a book right now. You're delivering a talk, and this is the easiest way for you to get your essence to the people who are listening. And so when you, after you have this all fleshed out and you kind of have a bit of a handle on what you're going to say, circle back with me, and then we'll talk about performance, and we'll talk about silence, and we'll talk about that sort of thing. Cool. The only other thing I wanted to say is at one point in there, you used the symbol RTT.
Yeah.
We don't know what that is. You tell us later, but tell us if you're going to use that, say the word. So we're like, oh, I know what that is.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise you've lost us. And the fact that we learn it later, we can't come back and get back the time we lost when you lost us during the talk.
Okay. Yeah. I think that might've been one of the times I was ad-libbing. So yes.
Okay. All right. With your face, let me know when you're ready for next steps.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You got this. Love you.
Thanks. All right. Bye.